Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. All right, so you guys really threw us a curveball with this one, a whole global sports thing. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you're all really interested in how sports and national identity are connected.
Absolutely. So it looks like we've got some stuff on the USA, Taiwan, Japan, China, the UK, even France. Should be a pretty wild ride. The mission here is to basically just pull out the interesting stuff. You know, like what makes people tick? Why do certain countries go nuts for certain sports? All those interesting connections between history and culture and sports. I'm not going to bore you with like a history lecture or anything. This is all about those aha moments.
Right, those moments where it all just clicks. It's like a light bulb goes off.
Exactly. And get this, we even found some pretty surprising stuff about how colonial history shaped some of these sporting preferences. Plus, we'll even touch on how global media plays a huge role too. It's all connected, you know?
It is. It's a really fascinating web.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the U.S., shall we? Home sweet home. And guess what? Not really a shocker here, but American football reigns supreme. Like, duh, right?
I mean, can you imagine America without football?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's so ingrained in our culture. Think about those crazy college football rivalries. My cousin went to Alabama, and let me tell you, if you even breathe a word against the Crimson Tide down there,
whoa, you're in for it.
You better watch out. But yeah, college football is just huge. And then, of course, there's the Super Bowl. Talk about a national obsession. It's basically a holiday. People plan their whole year around it. Over 100 million people watch it every year. And a poll, I think it was in 2024, said over half Americans think it's like the American sport.
It's a spectacle. It's more than just a game at this point. It's a cultural event.
Totally. And did you know it actually evolved from rugby and soccer way back in the 19th century? Like it started in universities.
Yeah, that's something that really stood out to me in the research. That whole connection to college culture is super interesting. It wasn't just a sport that popped up out of nowhere. It was nurtured in these academic settings. I think that played a big role in building that strong sense of local pride and competition. And when you think about it, the strategy involved, those crazy playbooks they use, it's like planning a military campaign. And then, of course, there's that raw physicality. Those hits are brutal. You could definitely say it reflects a certain American, how should I put this?
Assertiveness.
Yeah, assertiveness. Planning things out meticulously and then going full force to get the job done.
So true. And right behind football in the popularity contest, we've got basketball. And the NBA, I got to give them props. They've definitely played a huge role in that. The NBA Finals in 2023 averaged a whopping 18 million viewers.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. And rounding out the top three in the U.S., it's good old baseball. You know, America's pastime, hot dogs, apple pie, all that jazz.
There's definitely that nostalgic vibe with baseball, right? Like a connection to a simpler time. Even though the game itself has changed a lot over the years, there's still that feeling.
Totally. And get this, in 2023, MLB racked up 330 billion minutes of total viewing time. That's mind-boggling. I guess it's not called America's pastime for nothing.
It's wild. And it's interesting to think about how those three top sports in the U.S., even though they're all so different, they kind of reflect different aspects of the American personality, you know? Football's got that strategic, super physical thing going on. Basketball is all about that fast-paced, high-energy action. And baseball, it's more laid back, more traditional.
Totally agree. Like different strokes for different folks, but all distinctly American in a way. All right, let's switch gears and head over to Taiwan. You ready for this? Their number one sport is, drum roll please, baseball.
No way. Really?
Yeah, who would have thought, right? But seriously, it's their national sport. Like, they love baseball. And the craziest part is that it all goes back to the Japanese colonial period. You know, 1895 to 1945.
Wow, so it's got some deep roots there.
Big time. And Taiwan was like a Little League World Series dynasty back in the day. They won 13 titles between 1969 and 1982. That's insane. And even now, their professional league, the CPBL, is doing pretty well. They averaged over 5,000 fans a game in 2023. Plus, they've been kicking butt in some international tournaments lately. They won the WBSC Premier 12 in 2024 and the Asian Baseball Championship in 2023. They've even got their own star players. Guys like Chang Yu Chang, who was the MVP in his group in the World Baseball Classic in 2023, and Chen Chi-sim.
That's a really powerful example of how sport can become so intertwined with national identity. Like, it's more than just a game, especially in a place like Taiwan with its complex history. You can just imagine what those Little League victories must have meant to them, especially during a time when they were trying to find their place on the world stage. It's like baseball became a symbol of national pride and resilience. And it makes me wonder, like, what is it about baseball that makes it so adaptable across cultures? Because we've got America, Taiwan, Japan, all with baseball as a top sport. But their histories and cultures are so different.
It's a fascinating question. Is it the blend of individual skill and teamwork?
Yeah.
Is it the rhythm of the game? It's definitely something to think about.
Right. Like, what is it about baseball that makes it so universally appealing? Anyway, so back to Taiwan. Their number 2 sport is basketball, which isn't too surprising, with the NBA being such a global phenomenon. Plus, they've got their own local leagues. But their number 3 sport, now, this one might throw you for a loop. It's badminton.
Badminton? Really? That's unexpected.
Right, I know. It's not exactly what you'd think of as a top-tier sport. But apparently it's gotten a huge boost in Taiwan, thanks to this amazing athlete, Tai Ziying. She's like a badminton superstar. She's won tons of international tournaments, and millions of people in Taiwan tune in to watch her play. It just goes to show how much of an impact a single super talented athlete can have on a sport's popularity. It's like she's put badminton on the map for Taiwan. It's a great reminder that individual stories can really shape the way we view entire sports.
Totally. Okay, let's hop over to Japan now. And brace yourself, their number 1 sport is also baseball.
No way! Seriously, that's 3 for 3!
I know, right? It's crazy. It seems like baseball has a real stronghold in that part of the world. And it's been that way for a long time. Baseball was introduced in Japan in the late 19th century, and it just took off. A recent survey showed that something like 43% of Japanese people are baseball fans.
Wow, that's a pretty significant chunk of the population.
Right, and they've got their own massive professional league, the MPB. It's super popular. And their national team is always a force to be reckoned with in international competitions. Apparently, a visit from an American all-star team way back in 1934 really helped spark baseball's popularity in Japan. That team even had the legendary Babe Ruth on it.
Babe Ruth in Japan, that must have been an incredible sight.
I can only imagine. It really shows how those early encounters with international sporting legends can have a lasting impact.
Yeah, like a ripple effect that shapes a whole sporting culture.
Really. So we've got Taiwan and Japan, both with baseball as their top sport. Even though their histories and how the sport was introduced are so different, it's kind of like baseball can be localized and fit into these totally different cultural contexts. Pretty amazing.
It is. It speaks to the power of sport to transcend borders and adapt to different cultural values. It would be really interesting to delve deeper into what specific elements of baseball resonate so strongly with both Taiwanese and Japanese culture. Is it the focus on discipline and precision? Is it the strategic depth of the game? It's definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, definitely food for thought. Now, Japan's number 2 sport is soccer, or football as they call it in most of the world. Their professional league, the J-League, is pretty popular, and their national team has been making waves internationally, especially with the younger generation. They had a really strong showing in the 2024 World Cup qualifiers.
So it seems like soccer is gaining traction globally, even in countries with long-established sporting traditions.
Absolutely. It's a global game. Now, ready for this? Japan's number 3 sport is
sumo wrestling. Wow, that's so cool.
Right. It's their traditional national sport, so it's steeped in history and cultural significance. Even though maybe fewer people actively participate in sumo compared to baseball or soccer, it still has a ton of viewers and is seen as a really important part of their heritage.
That's really fascinating. It shows how deeply tradition and cultural heritage can influence a nation's sporting preferences. Sumo is like a living, breathing link to Japan's past. It makes you wonder what deeper cultural needs it fulfills for the Japanese people that keep it so relevant even in the modern era.
Totally. It's something unique and special. Okay, let's shift our focus to China now. Their number 1 sport is, are you ready for this?
Basketball.
Basketball. Wow. I didn't see that coming.
I know, right? It seems like basketball is really taking the world by storm, and China is no exception. It's absolutely huge over there. I mean, we're talking about an estimated 300 million people who play basketball in China.
300 million. That's almost the entire population of the U.S. I know. It's crazy. And they say there are around 500 million NBA fans in China. It's mind-boggling.
That is mind-boggling.
Yeah. And you can't underestimate the influence of the NBA on basketball's popularity in China. Those NBA stars, they're like global icons. especially players like Yao Ming, who was a Chinese basketball legend playing in the NBA. He was a huge catalyst for the sport's popularity back home.
For sure. Yao Ming's success in the NBA really opened doors and brought so much attention to Chinese basketball. It's a classic example of how individual stars can shape the global sporting landscape.
Absolutely. And China's got their own professional league, the CBA, which is getting increasingly popular. Plus, they hosted the FIBA World Cup in 2019, which was a massive event. It seems like basketball is only going to get bigger and bigger in China.
It's amazing to witness this global shift in sporting preferences. You know, it makes you wonder if these global trends are impacting traditional sports in China. Like, are younger people more drawn to internationally popular sports like basketball? Are those traditional sports struggling to stay relevant? It's a fascinating question to consider.
Definitely something to ponder. Yeah. Okay, their number 2 sport is table tennis, which, totally makes sense. It's often considered their national sport. They've been dominating international table tennis competitions for decades.
I mean, they're practically unbeatable in table tennis. It's insane.
Right. They're incredible. And their number 3 sport is badminton. Again, just showing how popular badminton is across Asia, especially with all those legendary players like Lin Dan who've really elevated the sport.
It's interesting to see how those sports with a lower barrier to entry, like badminton and table tennis, can gain such widespread popularity. Like, you don't need a ton of equipment or a huge field to play. It makes them really accessible to a wider range of people.
Totally. Okay, let's head over to the UK now. Home of the Beatles, fish and chips, and, you guessed it, football.
Had to be football, right?
Absolutely. It's like a religion over there. It's so ingrained in their culture. Like, it goes way back to the 19th century when they standardize the rules of the game. And their Premier League, forget about it, it's like the most popular football league in the world. They've got billions of viewers worldwide. And those local clubs like Manchester United and Liverpool, they're like institutions. People are fiercely loyal to their teams.
The whole culture surrounding football in the UK is incredible. It's so deeply rooted in local communities and working-class history, and the Premier League's global success has really turned it into a symbol of national pride and identity.
And those fans are something else. The singing, the chanting, the whole atmosphere at those matches is electric. In 2023, over 2 million adults in the UK played football at least twice a month.
You know, it's amazing to see how football has managed to maintain that strong connection to its working class roots, even as it's become this global phenomenon. Like, how does that history continue to shape the fan culture and the way people experience the game in the UK today? It's really interesting to think about.
It is. Like, it's more than just a sport. It's a way of life for a lot of people. Now, their number 2 sport is cricket. It's considered a national pastime, too. They've got these epic international rivalries, like the Ashes series against Australia, which always gets people fired up.
Cricket has such a rich history and tradition in the UK. It's interesting how it's managed to hold on to its popularity despite the rise of football.
For sure. And their number 3 sport is rugby. They've got both rugby union and rugby league, which are both pretty popular. And those international tournaments like the Six Nations, those always get people riled up.
The UK really is a diverse sporting nation. You've got football with its global reach, cricket with its deep historical roots, and then rugby, which is just brutal.
No kidding. Rugby's not for the faint of heart. All right, last but not least, let's hop over to France. And guess what? Their number 1 sport is, new surprises here, football.
Of course. It's the beautiful game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And France has had some serious success on the international stage. Winning those World Cups in 98 and 2018, it's like the whole country unites behind their national team.
Those World Cup victories must have been incredible for France. Like, how did those moments of national unity impact French society? Did they bridge any cultural divides? It's fascinating to think about.
Totally. And you can see it in the numbers, too. In 2024, over half of French people said they were interested in football. And their professional league, Ligue 1, generated a whopping 2.4 billion euros in revenue in the 2022-23 season.
Wow, that's some serious money. It just shows how popular and how economically important football is in France.
Absolutely. Now, their number 2 sport is rugby. It's got a really strong following, especially in the south of France. Their top 14 league is pretty competitive, and their national team always puts up a good fight in the Six Nations tournament.
It's interesting how sporting preferences can even vary within a country. Like with rugby being more popular in the south of France, it shows how regional and historical factors can play a role too.
Totally agree. And their number 3 sport is tennis. It's probably no coincidence that they host the French Open, one of the most prestigious tennis tournaments in the world. It's held at Roland Garros, which is like a legendary tennis venue.
Hosting a major international sporting event like the French Open definitely helps to raise the profile of a sport. And tennis is such a global sport anyway, with iconic players from all over the world.
Absolutely. All right, so we've taken a whirlwind tour of the sporting world, haven't we? We've seen how different countries have their own unique sporting passions, from American football to sumo wrestling to badminton.
It's been a real eye-opener.
It has. But the big question is, what does it all mean? Why are certain sports so deeply ingrained in certain cultures? Our sources make a really compelling point, which is that the popularity of these sports is closely tied to each country's history, culture, and social fabric. Like, it's not just about the game itself. It's about what that game represents. It's about shared values and national identity.
Exactly. It's like these sports are almost like a cultural fingerprint for each nation. They tell a story about who they are and where they've come from.
So let's break it down a bit. Starting with American football. We talked about that strong link to university culture, those intense regional rivalries, and how the Super Bowl is basically this massive social ritual. And when you think about it, those core themes of teamwork, strategic planning, and that just raw physicality, they do seem to resonate with certain aspects of the American spirit, right?
For sure. Like, that whole idea of striving for excellence, pushing boundaries, and achieving success on a grand scale, the Super Bowl embodies those values perfectly.
Totally. Now, how about Taiwan and baseball? It's fascinating how it became such a powerful symbol of national identity, especially given its origins during Japanese colonial rule. And the way those fans are so passionate and involved at those CPBL games with all the singing and cheering, it really strengthens that sense of community.
It's really remarkable how baseball has evolved in Taiwan. Like, it was introduced by a colonizing power, but it's become something that truly belongs to the Taiwanese people. Those recent international victories must feel incredible for them.
Yeah, it's like a real affirmation of their identity on the world stage. And speaking of baseball, how about Japan? It's their #1 sport, too. Introduced during the Meiji era, which was a time of huge change and modernization for Japan. And baseball really came to embody certain values like discipline, teamwork, and perseverance.
Those values are definitely central to Japanese culture, so it makes sense that they would be reflected in their sporting preferences. And the way they've integrated baseball into their society is really interesting. Like, those nationwide high school baseball tournaments are huge cultural events.
They are. It's like everyone's glued to the TV watching those games. And then you've got those big corporate-sponsored teams like the Yomiuri Giants. It's also interconnected with their culture and their way of life.
It's really impressive how deeply ingrained baseball has become in Japanese society.
Now let's jump over to China and basketball. It's like the sport of the young generation over there. And you can't deny the influence of the NBA and those global superstars like Yao Ming and Jeremy Lin. They've really captured the imagination of millions of Chinese fans.
It's a classic example of globalization and the impact of media. Like, those NBA stars are seen as role models and icons all over the world, and it's clearly having a huge impact on sporting preferences in China.
It's like a new generation is embracing a global sport and making it their own. And then we have the UK and football. I mean, is there anything more British than football? It's so deeply rooted in their history, their culture, their sense of community. Those local clubs are more than just teams. They're like social institutions.
It's hard to imagine the UK without football. It's everywhere. And the passion of these fans is legendary. They're known all over the world for their dedication and their...
rowdiness.
Yeah, let's go with rowdiness, but it's all part of the experience.
Totally. And finally, France and football. Another nation that just loves the beautiful game. Those World Cup victories were moments of pure national euphoria, and players like Zidane and Mbappe are national heroes.
It's interesting how sport can be such a powerful unifying force, especially in countries like France with diverse populations and sometimes complex social dynamics. Like, football becomes this shared experience that transcends those differences.
For sure. And those French fans, they know how to create an atmosphere. It's electric. Okay, now here's something that I found really intriguing in our research. The fact that both Taiwan and Japan have baseball as their #1 sport really underscores how historical events, like colonialism, can have a long-lasting impact on sporting preferences.
It's amazing to think about. Like, baseball was introduced to both countries under very specific historical circumstances, but it's taken root and evolved in such different ways. It's a testament to the resilience of culture and the power of adaptation.
Absolutely. And then you've got the rise of basketball in China, which is so clearly linked to globalization and the influence of global media. It's a reminder that we're all interconnected and that these trends and influences can really shape a nation's sporting landscape.
Totally. And it makes you wonder what the future holds, you know. Will we see even more convergence of sporting preferences as the world becomes increasingly interconnected? Or will those unique national sporting identities persist and maybe even evolve in new and unexpected ways?
It's a great question. Okay, I want to zoom in a bit on Taiwan's baseball scene because they've been doing really well on the international stage lately. They've had their ups and downs in the World Baseball Classic. For example, in 2023, they did make it out of their group, but they had some good wins, and their player, Cheng Yu-Cheng, even won the MVP award.
That's impressive, especially considering the level of competition in the World Baseball Classic. It's basically the best players from all over the world battling it out.
No kidding. But then you look at the WBSC Premier 12, and Taiwan actually won the whole thing in 2024. It's a huge deal. They even beat Japan. And they did it again in the 2023 Asian Baseball Championship. It's like they're really coming into their own.
Those are some serious victories. It shows that Taiwan is a force to be reckoned with in the baseball world.
Absolutely. They've also had some decent results in the Olympics, finishing 5th in the 2008 Beijing Games. But they didn't qualify for the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, so it seems like they're still working on that consistency at the global level.
I mean, the Olympics are incredibly competitive. Only the very best teams in the world qualify.
For sure. But that 2024 Premier 12 win definitely feels like a turning point for Taiwanese baseball. Like they're on an upward trajectory.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how they perform in future international tournaments.
So what's behind Taiwan's baseball success? Well, it seems like those historical and cultural roots are a big part of it. Plus, they've really stepped up their game with training and development programs. They've even got a baseball revitalization plan.
I love that. A baseball revitalization plan. That's commitment.
Right. They're taking it seriously. And they've got former MLB players, like the legendary Wang Shenming, coming back to coach. It seems like their pitching, in particular, has improved a lot. But they still face some challenges, like their professional league is smaller than the MLB and the MPB, and there's the issue of talented players getting signed to play overseas.
It's the classic dilemma for smaller baseball nations. You develop amazing talent, and then they get lured away by the bigger leagues.
Totally. And some of the sources suggest that maybe the government could do more to support baseball in Taiwan. Like maybe more funding or more investment in facilities.
It makes sense. If they want to continue competing at the highest level, they need to make sure they have the resources and the infrastructure to nurture that talent.
Now, this is something I found really fascinating and totally unique to Taiwan. The role of cheerleaders in their baseball culture. They're not just there to look pretty and do a few cheers. They're like full-on entertainment squads.
I've seen some videos of Taiwanese baseball cheerleaders, and they're amazing. So much energy and enthusiasm.
I know, right? They've got these elaborate routines. They do all these chants and dances, and they really get the crowd going. They even interact with the fans. It's like a whole performance.
It's so different from the traditional cheerleader role in American sports. Like, they're not just on the sidelines. They're actively involved in creating this incredibly vibrant and engaging atmosphere.
Exactly. And it seems like it's working. The CPBL has seen a significant increase in attendance over the past few years, and a lot of people attribute that to the popularity of the cheerleaders, especially among younger fans.
It's smart marketing. It makes the whole baseball experience more exciting and appealing to a wider audience.
Totally. And there's even evidence that the cheerleaders can boost both fan and player morale. Like, there's this story about them singing Sweet Caroline during a tense moment in the 2023 Taiwan series, and it's said to have really lifted everyone's spirits.
Oh, I love that. It's like a classic feel-good sports moment.
And even players have said that the energy from the cheerleaders can be really motivating. They've also drawn inspiration from Japanese and Korean cheerleading cultures, but have added their own Taiwanese twist to it. It's a really interesting blend of influences.
That fusion of different cultural elements is really cool. It shows how these global trends can be localized and adapted to fit specific cultural contexts.
And the impact goes beyond just the game itself. They're attracting new fans to the sport, especially women and younger people. The female viewership of the CPBL has gone up significantly since the cheerleaders became so popular.
That's amazing. It's a testament to the power of engaging entertainment and creating an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere.
Absolutely. And some of these cheerleaders have become huge celebrities in Taiwan. They've got their own fan bases. They do endorsements. They even have their own merchandise. It's like a whole industry.
It's fascinating to see how they've become such a significant part of the whole baseball culture in Taiwan.
And it's not just limited to Taiwan anymore. They've even gained some international recognition, especially after their appearances during the 2023 World Baseball Classic.
It's great to see them getting that global exposure. It's a unique and vibrant aspect of Taiwanese culture that deserves to be celebrated.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there have been some discussions and concerns raised about the role of cheerleaders, like potential objectification, and whether the focus on them can sometimes distract from the actual game itself. And there have been past discussions about their working conditions, which is something that definitely needs to be addressed.
It's important to have those conversations and to make sure that the cheerleaders are being treated fairly and respectfully. Like, it's all about finding that balance between entertainment and ethical consideration.
Totally agree. But overall, it seems like Taiwanese cheerleaders play a really vital and multifaceted role in their baseball culture. They bring energy and excitement to the games, they attract new fans, they boost morale, and they're even becoming cultural ambassadors for Taiwan on the international stage.
They're definitely more than just pretty faces on the sidelines. They're an integral part of the whole experience.
For these fans, innings 1 through 9, especially for like mascots there as well. Put on their suits. It's warm here. It is really warm tonight.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? We've traveled the globe and explored the fascinating world of popular sports and what those passions reveal about each country's identity. From American football's connection to national values in the U.S., to Taiwan's baseball legacy and the unique role of their cheerleaders, it's been an amazing journey.
It's been eye-opening. It really shows how sport can be such a powerful lens through which to understand different cultures and societies.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a lot to think about. I mean, considering the deep cultural roots of these sports and the ever-increasing influence of globalized entertainment, how do you think our sporting passions might evolve in the future? Will we see more of a merging of global tastes, or will those unique national sporting identities continue to thrive?
That's the million-dollar question. It'll be fascinating to see how those forces of globalization and local tradition continue to interact and shape the global sporting landscape in the years to come.
No doubt. It's something we can all ponder as we watch the games unfold. And speaking of deep dives and exploring different cultures, if you're looking for some amazing travel content, you should definitely check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Yeah, he's got some awesome videos.
He does. He travels all over the world, does really cool whiskey and alcohol unboxings, and even shares his own original music. You can find a link to his channel in the show notes. And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a blast.
Until next time.
See ya.